Now we are in Women's Month and en route to the G20 summit. The forum's Women Empowerment Working Group was established in 2023 under India's presidency and gained further traction when Brazil was at the helm. Its main objective is to tackle gender inequality by promoting women's economic independence, and with equality forming part of this year's G20 theme under South Africa's presidency, the country has the chance to promote policies for women's economic empowerment even further. UN Women SA's program analyst and G20 Technical Lead Mofokeng joins us with greater perspective on this. Newa, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. And let's start there with your assessment of the work our Global South counterparts have done in pushing for the advancement of policies that support women's economic empowerment.
Good afternoon. I think perhaps maybe I can start off by mentioning that the G20 has increasingly recognized that gender equality and women's empowerment isn't just a social issue. It's a core economic and development priority. So what we've seen under India and Brazil's leadership, we've seen a real shift in how women's empowerment is framed and operationalized, and this was illustrated through India's presidency in 2023, as you've mentioned in your intro. And this was a turning point because the India presidency didn't just talk about women's development. They pushed for women-led development. And this is a powerful reframing as it led to the creation of the Empowerment of Women Working Group, which was formally endorsed in the New Delhi Leaders Declaration. So UN Women really played a key role here, providing technical support, shaping the agenda, and ensuring that issues like care infrastructure, digital inclusion, and women's leadership in STEM and green sectors were front and center. And when we look at Brazil, Brazil took that foundation and built on it. They hosted the first official Empowerment of Women Working Group meeting, and they prioritized 3 areas, which focused on equality, on care work, ending violence against women, as well as climate justice. So really what UN Women did there with Brazil is support the Brazilian Ministry of Women, as well as the Women 20 delegates with the evidence-based policy advice, platforms for debate, and a strong focus on intersectionality, especially the economic empowerment of Afro-descendant women in Brazil. So what's important about this is that it isn't just about inclusion, it's about transformation. And UN Women really has helped embed gender equality into climate finance, development bank policies, and broader G20 economic frameworks. We're seeing gender equality being treated as a lever for sustainable development, not just a checkbox. And that's the kind of shift that has long-term impact. The Empowerment of Women Working Group is still young, but it is already proving to be a powerful space for shaping global policy. And we believe that with UN Women's continued support and leadership from countries like India and Brazil, we're moving closer to a G20 that truly reflects the power and potential of women. And I think maybe just to before your next question, just to also mention that broadly speaking, within other G20 tracks, the G20's focus on gender equality and women's empowerment has grown over time, with more commitments and broader areas of focus. And it's showing a need for more concerted efforts towards gender mainstreaming. And the significance really extends beyond symbolic representation to tangible improvements in global policy outcomes, economic performance, and the legitimacy of international governance itself. So as the G20 continues to shape global policy and economic policy frameworks, ensuring gender equality in its governance structures is very key, and it shouldn't just be a matter of fairness, but of effectiveness and sustainability in addressing some of the world's most pressing challenges.
You mentioned some important terms there. You speak about intersectionality, you speak about transformation, you speak about, policies that ensure that, women economic empowerment leads to sustainable development. And I wonder, with, a platform like the G20, we have governments, we have businesses, we have NGOs, really different stakeholders, and how everyone is working together, because women economic empowerment works in all these tracks.
Yes, that is true. I mentioned earlier the importance of having gender mainstreaming, and gender mainstreaming is pivotal because it go in the context of the G20. Let me put it this way: gender mainstreaming means that embedding a gender perspective into all aspects of economic and political decision making, ensuring that gender equality is not treated as a standalone issue, but as a fundamental consideration across all the policy areas. And this approach recognizes that there's no such thing as gender neutral economic policy. All decisions have differentiated impacts on women and men, and effective policy making must account for these differences from the outset. So, for example, when finance ministers deliberate on global economic stability, gender mainstreaming really ensures they consider how monetary and fiscal policies affect women and men differently. In discussions on infrastructure financing, it means evaluating how transport systems can enhance women's mobility, safety, and access to economic opportunities. And when we look at things like trade negotiations, it involves assessing whether trade agreements support or hinder women entrepreneurs and workers. So while the G20 includes a dedicated working group on women's empowerment, gender mainstreaming goes further. It calls for all 15 Sherpa track working groups and all 7 finance track working groups to apply a gender lens to their respective areas.
Now, we know that South Africa has these 3 key priorities that include GBV, look at the care work economy, as well as financial inclusion. Just in your technical lead role, Newo, what's your assessment on the care economy in the country? Are the right policies in place for it to make a significant contribution to the economy at large?
So South Africa's G20 presidency represents a pivotal opportunity to elevate the priorities of the global south, particularly in Africa. You would know that in Brazil, the care economy was also a priority. So the South African government has really continued to spotlight and advocate for priorities of the global south within global economic governance. As the first African country to lead the G20, South Africa is uniquely positioned to champion a more equitable and representative international system, one that reflects the voices and development needs of the continent. So South Africa's leadership also does offer a critical opportunity for G20 members, particularly those from the Global South, to engage meaningfully with the priorities of the Global South. And this includes advancing gender equality as a cross-cutting priority. But when we go deeper into the policy perspectives on the care economy, both paid and unpaid care work and households' responsibility, South Africa is really leading a bold shift in how we value care work. The focus is on recognizing, reducing, and redistributing unpaid care work, because we do know that unpaid care work is disproportionately affecting women and girls, and they bear the burden of responsibility for unpaid care work. So a major barrier to women's economic participation is unpaid care work. And this has been globally researched, and there's data that speaks to this. And in our perspective, UN Women has supported technical working groups and policy frameworks to ensure care is treated as an economic issue, not just as a social issue. But a part of our advocacy is really to have care work valued and to see the care economy considering care, both paid and unpaid, into the gross domestic product of the country.
And just quickly before I let you go, I mean, we could go on for hours and hours, but I'd like to touch on the issue around financial inclusion. It's very interesting to see that all these priorities are connected, right? You can see that when one is not financially independent, they're more susceptible to be taken advantage of, and that also then speaks to issues around GBV. But on the financial inclusion bit, looking at women-led businesses, what's the kind of envisioned support for these kind of businesses? We can look at support in terms of funding, support in terms of access to market, and particularly in Africa, I guess also the global south South in particular, we have the informal market where there is also, a push to educate and formalize some of these businesses as well.
Yes, that is true. So when we look at the financial inclusion for women, what that really means is access to credit. It means access to land, procurement opportunities, and gender-responsive budgeting. And UN Women has helped convene a private sector dialogue to align business practices with the G20 gender goals. And this is really moving from pledges to performance, because we do know that we need collective action in terms of ensuring that women's financial inclusion is realized, and the banking system really plays a key role in this. We also know that from the government side, that the South African government has committed 40% of public procurement to women-owned businesses and launched a 20 billion transformation fund for women entrepreneurs. So these are not just national policies. The South African government is also ensuring that they are part of changing the landscape and ensuring that we do see more women being financially included, women having access to productive resources, so that they do not find themselves in vulnerable situations where they fall victim to gender-based violence, because we do know that lack of financial inclusion and financial security does push women into vulnerable situations where they're confronted by gender-based violence.
All right, let's leave it there, Newa. Thanks so much for your time and just sharing your insights with us. That was Newa Mofokeng, UN Women SA's Program Analyst and G20 Technical Lead.